Welcome back to the FIDE Podcast. I'm Dan Barish, founder of FIDE, and this is a podcast where we talk about enterprise B2B marketing and really get into the details of how to go to market in really, a challenging time, 2026. So many things going on, so many things changing in the world, and enterprise buying, I think, being even more difficult, than it has been in the past. Today, I'm joined by Prateek Mathur, the head of marketing for SAP SuccessFactors in Asia Pacific. And Prateek, I'm so excited to have you here. We've had such an interesting discussion coming up to this recording, and I just think you have such incredible wisdom to share with us. So thanks for taking the time today.
Daniel, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today, and such an exceptional work that you have already been doing putting together this platform for marketers. And I'll really love this series, and it's just an honor to be here as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Danny.
Well, I'm excited to get into the discussion with you, and something that came up in our prior chats was just about the marketing funnel. And I think that's where I'd love to start by, asking you about you in your everyday are thinking about how to market to the enterprise. And we think about this idea of a funnel, which I think is somewhat reductive, right? And selling into B2C, I know about the product. Oh, this is great. I want to buy it. I buy it. This is not what happens in enterprise marketing, right? There's a decision committee. There's so many different touch points. And I think increasingly the buyer journey is full of these touch points that we as marketers have to create, but there's no guarantee of them being touched in a certain order or anything like that. So yes. The question is, how do you deal with that as a marketer? How do you figure out what the touch points are going to be? How do you figure out what that buyer journey is going to be, and where do you invest your time?
I think this is a very interesting point that you made, Daniel, because in a way a funnel is kind of collapsing in a way right now, and I'll tell you why. Because the decision making process in many of the organizations that we deal with is not linear. In fact, everywhere it's now quite complex. And you mentioned a word in your question, which is buying committee, right? And I think that has also gone. It's evolved. So gone are the days when we as tech marketers would probably rely on a persona. Probably at times it was an IT buyer who would probably be the gatekeeper. We would have to engage with, open doors, and then we have conversation with the rest of the organization in a very structured, linear fashion, Daniel, as we move forward. And it gave a very predictable flow to the funnel. Right. And we could put those steps in order to be able to move forward in the opportunity cycle. However, we now know that about 60 to 70% of what we have to tell customers already know. Here, right? We at times, we have this challenge as well where, if you're not in the top 5 or top 4 of customer shortlist, which they do basis their own research, then chances are, and there was a 6th Sense study on this one recently, where they talked about that if there are about 95% chances that if you are on the first 5, 6 shortlist of the customer, that is when you have chance to make it. Otherwise, you're probably, only 5% of vendors who are not in the shortlist make it. So, yes, you're right. The funnel, there is a challenge. It's collapsing, it's changing, it's becoming dynamic. So hence your question, right? How do we create the right process and what do we do, right? So of course, top of the funnel that we see right now, we see a lot of, it's digital engagement. It's mostly how do you put content where the customer is right? Where they're searching for you. Where they are looking for the problems that they are trying to solve, right? So is it that your solution appear naturally in their search when they are searching in their, to them? So that's one way to be there with the customer when they need you. That's one, which is through our digital platforms. And then, of course, as we go towards the bottom of the funnel and towards, the middle funnel and bottom of the funnel, that's where some of the engagements like, your the connect roundtables, which give you human to human connect, right? Because and ABMs and a lot of other things, they come into play, which help build that trust and connect that is needed for a customer to sign a final check, right? So
Trust is so important, isn't it?
that's right. So I think right now you can build a lot of credibility through the digital engagements that a customer do. You can inform them, the customer about your product, your solutions, your offering, how you solve the business problem. But unless they have, in even in the world where a lot is happening on digital, the tech decisions are still happening in the rooms where people sit together, discuss, and then once that level of trust is achieved, that is when you go ahead and sign the check. So yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about that top of funnel.
yeah.
Because what's really interesting, especially in a tech world, is you're not in the engineering team. You don't have control over the fact that X thing, works or doesn't work. And yet you have to make sure that your product is part of that top 5 list, to your point. Otherwise, the person is typically not even considering it.
Yeah.
So what kinds of things are you doing to ensure that you do show up, that you are top of mind, that you are part of that consideration list?
Now that's very interesting why you say that. Well, because the reason why a customer is looking at your solution, right, is so diverse, right? It's sometimes, for example, I'll give you a small example, right? I look at APAC, Asia Pacific in Japan for SAP SuccessFactors solution. When I now look at a customer in Japan, right, who's looking for, say, their objective of looking at could be, how can they augment their workforce with AI? How they can probably do more with less workforce, right? How they can upskill, that their age-old workforce, or an aging workforce, if I may call them, to for a lack of a better word. But how do we really, bring the best out of them, right? So, and then the AI augmentation and all that upskilling comes into picture. But when you look at a high growth market like, say, Southeast Asia, China, India, these markets, you'd probably look at how can we use the vast resource pool that we have to solve the problems of the world? How do we look at the skill gap in terms of other European countries, US, others, and how do we, hire the right kind of resources? So the same skill conversation, but the context are so widely different, right? Now, why I give that example was that if I'm solving the same skills solution, my going in position or the business problem that I'm going to solve would be different for these two set of customers, right? So hence, it's important that one, when I am, looking at this problem, I'm able to understand my customers. What is it that they're looking for from my solutions? And then hence from that, how do I really convert that into powerful content, right? And put it out there for customers to consume, and help them also understand how my solution somewhere, would be able to address that problem, right? So you talk about the problem, and then you really give them the proof or the pudding by actually demonstrating that capability. And the third part, which is very essential in this entire journey, is to have credible customer stories who have actually done that before with you, right? So I think this is how all this kind of, probably come together, Daniel. And so, yeah, that would be my take on how you probably go about solving things. Get the content strategy right, understand the customer, get your content funnel created well, so that you are it is almost like you're holding the customer's hand from one end of the bridge and helping them walk through it, right? So that they
Yeah, and you would hold a different customer's hand in a different way, right? You have to kind of know that customer. Some people want to move fast, some people want to move slow. Some people want more hand holding, some people want less. Some people want encouragement, some people want to do it on their own.
Yeah, some of them are on roller skates and some of them are not. So basically, yeah.
I used to have this mentor when I was younger, and one of the things that really stuck with me that he had said is, it's like you're on, soccer, football pitch, and there are goalposts at the end of the field, but you have to understand that in the work we do, those goalposts are going to move, and you have to kick the ball toward, the goalposts where they are, not necessarily
Absolutely.
just in the exact same spot every single time.
That's true.
Or as a Canadian, I really should bring up hockey here. I think
Yeah.
it's where's the hockey net at the end of the ice. But either way, yeah, I think it's so important to start by understanding your customer. And I think a lot of the work we do, people I'm seeing are very tempted, even in enterprise situations where they have lots of support and big teams and budgets. There's still a tendency to want to just go and make that customer story video or go
Yeah.
and write that web article. And I think, to your point, it's a matter of first starting by understanding the customer,
Absolutely.
and also the customer understanding is not static, right? Like, people change and the market's changing constantly. So I think it is a matter of figuring out how to do research and understanding and kind of having that input kind of being a constant into what you're doing,
Yeah.
and being humble enough to say, we don't always understand our customers perfectly. We seek to understand, and from there, creating content that we know is going to resonate with them, rather than, I don't know if you see other folks doing this, perhaps not in SAP, but elsewhere, is just saying, no, like, we know what they want, and then we go, we'll go make marketing. And I think a lot of that time, that's where we start to see things that don't stick.
So true. Daniel. At times, I've seen so much of the content which is so much inside out, right? Which is just talking about
Yes.
feature, functionality, products, what you offer. That's great, but that's something you would need down the line. First thing is why would customer give you attention? What is it that you're solving for? What is it that the customer will lose if he doesn't buy your solution in next 1 year, 6 months time frame, whatever it is, right? So unless and until you are hitting that particular pain area or a problem or an opportunity that the customer has, I don't think you would get the attention. And especially the amount of competition that we have, the amount of the customer is getting inundated with so much of messaging everywhere. So if you do not resonate well with what the customer is looking for, then chances are you are probably what we call as column fodder, right? You are just put in as a fodder just to make the
Yep.
list, but somewhere fifth and sixth, out of the. So yeah, that's
You're
what.
filling up the part of the feed on LinkedIn that everyone scrolls past. There has to be part of the feed that everyone scrolls past, right? Because the algorithm wants to make certain content interesting and other content not. And thank you very much for filling up the rest of the feed so that the things hopefully that you and I are doing are going to be a little bit more resonant. But it
Absolutely.
reminds me of a situation where it's kind of, I have an interesting job because we hire subcontractors and vendors to help with grow our business. And I remember this conversation I had once where the subcontractor said to me, Dan, I should have charged you way more for this project because I delivered so much extra value toward the end of this project.
Mhm.
And I just kind of sat there and I was incredulous because what he had done was something that I didn't want at all. I didn't need. And he just assumed that this is something that I would benefit from. And I feel like I took no benefit from it. So he didn't do the research. He didn't seek to understand, and instead just told me that I should be paying more money for this product. And I think that's where we start to have big problems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Understanding, you cannot assume what the customer wants. You always need to probably, always have an ear you have to always sense and respond.
Yes, exactly. It's a conversation. As marketers, we shouldn't be talking at our audience. We should be speaking with them.
Totally.
So let's talk a little bit about personas. I know we've talked a little bit about it already, Prateek, but there's so many different people who you could be marketing to. I mean, thinking just about your role, Asia Pacific. I mean, there's a number of countries, different cultures, and inside of each of those countries, each of those companies that you want to go after, there's HR people, there's technology people, there's a variety. And I imagine each of those people has a bit of a different definition of what value looks like.
Yeah.
So how do you starting from the place of knowing that you have to speak to these people in a different way, but also knowing that you're not infinitely resourced.
Yeah.
You can't come up with 1,000 different talk tracks. And even if you did, how could you keep track of them? How do you manage that challenge?
Yeah. So, so let's look at what's happening, and let's just understand the just gravity of this whole thing by, first of all, we need to understand as business, what are we losing if we are trying to serve everyone, You know, as a business, you should have ability to piss off people. What I mean by that is, there's something which I recently read in a book called Diary of the CEO. I would highly recommend that our listeners here read it. Look at that book. It's very interesting, very contrarian views about few things that we kind of believe, but really thought provoking. So it actually says you should piss off people, which means you know how to prioritize, right? But why is it important to prioritize? The simple thing is that uh, y- there are right now these complex buying committees, but there are some very recent research work which was done in this direction. Like for example, Forrester did in 2024. It's very famous. We all know this, about probably 86% of B2B purchase decisions stall during the buying process. And the reason for that they attribute is because of possibly a single stakeholder not being probably aligned during the early stage of the buying journey, right? Gardner, for example, said that 74% of the buying team experience unhealthy conflict during the decision making process. So if you really see, this is a serious thing within the customer organization itself, right? The way they are going about the decision, it is creating their own the internal dynamics that play between the buying committee also plays an important role on how the discussions going to move forward. And then finally, you probably, there are some other like and the buying committee is also getting more and more complex. There was a time where we looked at an average of 5 to 6, but Sixth Sense recent report said that the buying committee members have increased to now an average of 13 individuals in an enterprise or a kind of a decision making process. So there is definitely a need for us to look at the entire construct seriously. One, we need to have the relevant content mapped to the buying committee. So if I'm talking to HR audience, there it's not just HR audience that I'm trying to sell to. There is IT involved. There are CFOs involved. There is a CEO involved, and then there are whole lot of other critical decision makers and users who are part of those buying committees doing research on those products. So the content need to be mapped to them. More importantly, what IT companies have done in the past is they have addressed these buying in personas individually with the content. They have not really bought people together, right? Because that's where the conflict comes, right? It is not in their individual silos. They'd love probably what they have, but when they come together, do they have conflicting priorities? How do you try to solve for that? I'll give you one example, and sorry, I'm taking a long time in.
No, this is very interesting because I think there's a tendency to want to
Yeah,
create an individual piece of content for each.
yeah.
I'm so curious, like how do we solve for
Don't
this?
get me wrong. We definitely need individual content for individual personas, but during the engagement, there need to be a time and an engagement where these personas come together. For example, a few years back, when we were looking at this problem, we had an issue of how do we sell the value of entire cloud transformation to an organization, because cloud transformation was basically not just a software upgrade. It was also about how do they reimagine processes in cloud, right? A very similar thing is happening with how do you reimagine process with AI. So I was talking about a few years back when we were looking at cloud transition, really. And at that time also, there was this complex problems of bringing people together. So, I did a campaign called Live Business League, where we created a simulation, a game on a software or our ERP product, and basically invited cross-functional teams across multiple customers to participate in that, which was like one
Hmm.
company competing with other, right? On that virtual game, it was like
Oh
running a
wow,
company.
that's very interesting.
It was like running a company where one day was equal to like 1 minute, and they played for about, a quarter, which is, about 90 minutes of a game that they played, and they compared against who had a better PNL at the end of it, right? So, and
Huh.
there was a cross-functional team of, sitting across different tables, competing with each other. It was a phenomenal success. We got the amount of conversation we got started between those teams and how they see value in working together coherently in a business environment like that was really really powerful. So I'm just trying to tell you that you need to kind of narrow down the funnel, look at the buying committees, address to those core their business challenges, but at some point in time also find a way to bring them together to show the value that there is a gestalt effect of the solution that you will deploy, right?
What a great idea to kind of force people to
Would you
be
would you want
in the room together and almost solve their challenges themselves instead of you
yeah
having to go in and
yeah
or your sales team have to go in and objection handle.